I'd like to start by saying that this year at Ferryland has been certainly quite exceptional in terms of interesting and informative finds. Archaeologists are in the business of learning about the past, and this year at Ferryland, business has been very, very good for us down at the dig site. Unfortunately, when we started our field season on the 16th of June this year, we were greeted by something not so good in the form of significant erosion from the hillside here at the eastern perimeter of the site. So, and as you can see, it's causing quite a significant, having quite a significant impact on our archaeological resources. We spent the part of that first morning recovering and recording the damage that had taken place in the recent months. So you can see there's all sorts of concentrations of bricks and things from the 17th century up on the bank there just below Neil, as well as ceramics and clay tobacco pipes and glass, including this very nice pipe bowl, again just simply eroding out of the hillside at the eastern end of the site. I mean, obviously this is a significant issue that we're going to have to address in the near future, and the reason why is, just as Loyola said, and as Jim has said in the past, this is the best preserved and most substantial site in British North America. It's an archaeological gem, it's a treasure, and it would be an awful shame for us to lose this part of the site to shoreline erosion when we very likely have the means to do something about it. So if we could get some crib work or armor stone or something at this part of the site, that would be fantastic. So not a great start to the season, but overall, I think we made up for it later on. Now, certainly on a more positive note, the 2014 excavations were focused on two specific areas of the site. The first one is the one that you see right here. It's just to the south of the hall of Lord Baltimore's mansion house. So here's the hall of Baltimore's mansion here, and essentially it's a 36-foot by 16-foot builder's trench right behind the hall of Lord Baltimore's mansion, just between Anna right here and Catherine all the way down here in the ground. So at the bottom of this builder's trench, in places anywhere between 3 to over 6 feet below the present surface, we were finding all sorts of artifacts associated with the construction of Lord Baltimore's home back in the 1620s. So, what did we find? We found all sorts of sand and lime to make mortar for the house. We found lots of stones for the walls and a slate for the roof material, and all sorts of glass as well, obviously, for the windows. In amongst all that deposit, we found a lot of bone, a lot of fish bone, a lot of bird bone, and mammal bone as well. And it looks like these bones represent the remains of the meals taken by the former craftsmen who worked on the house. So the slaters, the masons, the quarrymen, the carpenters, who all came over to Avalon in the early 1620s to begin construction on Lord Baltimore's home. In amongst the same deposit, we also found a few other recent colonists to Ferryland in the 1620s in the form of several black rats, including our beloved lab mascot, Reggie, the giant rat, whom you wouldn't want to meet, certainly in a dark alley at night. He seems more dinosaur than rat, but they've grown quite big, apparently, in the pool, so there he is. In that same early deposit, all very early artifacts, again, from the founding of the colony of Avalon. So nice early clay tobacco pipe bowls. We found part of a lead bale seal. You can see some of the lettering right there. Lots of ceramics, lots of glass, and in amongst that same deposit, we found our most exciting object of the summer. I would say it's probably the most exciting object that we found in a half dozen years or more. This tiny little copper crucifix. It measures only 2.8 centimeters across. Now the crucifix itself on the front, you can see it bears a very simple representation of the crucifixion, and at the back an equally simple representation of the Virgin Mary and Christ child. We believe that the crucifix was once part of a rosary, and maybe it belonged to, very likely it belonged to an early Catholic colonist, or maybe it was belonging to one of the two Jesuit priests who came to Ferryland in 1627, or, you never know, it might have been Lord Baltimore's crucifix and rosary himself. We don't really know for certain, but what we do know for certain is that this object is an immensely important artifact, and the reason why it's so important, it's essentially a physical manifestation of religious freedom and religious toleration in British North America. And I say that because of this guy right here. George Calvert, the first Lord Baltimore, he envisioned this place, he envisioned Ferryland as a place of religious toleration and religious acceptance. So this was a place where all Christians, where Protestants and Catholics alike, could worship freely without any fear of persecution. Now back in England, of course, things were different. Catholics could be fined, they could be imprisoned. In extreme cases, they could be put to death for openly practicing their faith. Here at Avalon, here in Ferryland, Catholics and Protestants could live and work and worship freely. So these were very forward-thinking ideas for a visionary, for George Calvert in the 1620s. And again, this artifact, more than anything we've found so far, it really brings us back to that early and important part of early Canadian history. So it's an important religious artifact, it's an important historical artifact as well. So certainly very significant and quite an exciting find for this summer. And as Des said, we got a lot of press as a result. Even made it to CNN, I didn't get to Oprah, but we made it as far as CNN. Now the great thing about that layer in which that crucifix was found was that after Lord Baltimore's mansion was constructed, after it was completed, that builder's trench was completely filled in. So all of that early deposit at the bottom of Catherine's Street here, it's a small little deposit, but it was all perfectly sealed after the 1620s, after Baltimore's mansion was completed. So essentially what we have here is a deposit which brings us back right to those early years at Ferryland, right to the founding of the colony of Avalon, right to the period when George Calvert was here. So it's almost like a time capsule which can bring us right back to those early founding years at Ferryland. So a very, very important layer. The best thing about the layer is also the worst thing. The deposit, or the builder's trench, was completely filled in after the house was built, so what we're dealing with in some places, well over Catherine's Head here, 6 feet of the nastiest collection of rocks and gravel and soil that you've ever seen. So it's going to take us a number of years actually to uncover this entire deposit if the crew are willing, knock on wood. But stay tuned, because who knows what's going to be there. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of interesting and informative objects from the 1620s. So it's a really exciting find this year, and something which can bring us forward in the next few years in terms of potentially some very exciting and informative finds relating to early Ferryland. Now over at the western end of the site, right across from the old Colony Cafe, the crew ended up spending a large part of the summer exposing a segment or a section of the colony's early cobblestone street, which, as many of you know, was built in the 1620s. It essentially runs through the entire settlement for 400 feet, and it was used throughout the 17th century, at least right up until the French destruction in 1696. Now, the reason why it took us such a long time to excavate such a small segment of street was because directly above the street and to the south of it, we were hampered. We were slowed down simply because we hit such a very, very artifact-rich refuse deposit, a midden deposit, a deposit of 17th century garbage. It was almost unbelievable in terms of the richness of this deposit, and it was all throughout the area where Neil and Wayne are right here, and all at the front of that same cobblestone street. And just to give you an idea, I mean, in the course of even a day's work, in some cases we could bring in thousands of objects into the lab, and of course, which thanks to our professional lab crew and well-trained lab crew, we were able to process these objects each and every day to continue our excavations. So again, it's hugely, immensely rich in terms of the number of artifacts. And sort of to put this into better perspective, what we would find in the course of a week at Ferryland and this particular layer, it's what a normal archaeologist would expect to find in an 8 or 10 week season somewhere else. So immensely rich in terms of the number of objects and the variety of objects as well. So just an absolutely amazing, amazing collection of objects. And of course, it's by looking at these artifacts, it's by looking at this garbage that we can tell so much about daily life back in the 17th century. You know, if I were to look at 40 years of your garbage, you'd be surprised what I could tell you. Same thing applies here, except for we're a few hundred years back. So what can we tell by looking at these people's garbage from 350 or so years ago? Well, we can tell about their health. We can tell about their diet. We can tell about their leisure activities. We can tell about their bad habits. We can tell the kinds of vessels that they cooked their food on, the kinds of vessels that they ate from, and the kinds of vessels that they stored their food in. So all sorts of interesting things. We can tell to some extent about the types of furnishings in their homes by looking again at the artifacts, things like brass furniture tacks. We can tell about the types and variety of clothing that people wore, again, by looking at the artifacts in this midden deposit. And certainly, as well, we can tell about the social and economic standing of the people who threw that garbage out all that time ago. And by looking at the ceramics specifically, you can tell that these people were clearly of some means. They were fairly well off in the community of Ferryland. All sorts of decorative ceramics, expensive ceramics from France, from England, from Spain, from Portugal, from Germany. So again, these are not, just ordinary fishermen. These people were of greater means in terms of the residents of Ferryland. Certainly one, if not more, of the people who deposited this garbage were literate. They were able to read and write, which is fairly uncommon really back in the 17th century. We know this because someone used to seal their personal correspondence with this small little brass seal matrix. And on the inside of the seal matrix you can see this very nice three-masted sailing ship. And here's a positive impression. Very, very beautiful little thing. Again, someone used to seal their personal correspondence with wax or lacquer with this little device right here. Certainly last but not least, we also found this really neat bowl, the base of a tin glazed bowl, and on the inside you can see the painted name Jean. I and J's are used interchangeably in the 17th century, by the way, so that likely represents a J, so Jean. Who this Jean was, well, we don't really know, but we strongly suspect that the people who discarded that garbage were very likely members of the Kirk family. So it's possible that that garbage was deposited by the family of Philip Kirk or the family of David Kirk II, again sometime in the second half of the 17th century. So perhaps this Jean was the wife of David II or Philip Kirk, or perhaps one of the female children of either. Unfortunately, because census records from Ferryland from the 1670s and 1680s were so vague, they only list the names of the heads of households as opposed to the wives, the names of the wives and the children. So this Jean, for now, she's going to have to remain a little bit of a mystery until we can do some more archival research. Now, as for what next year will bring, well, we very much hope to return to these two very same productive parts of the site because, based upon what we found this year, I'm sure there are many, many more interesting and exciting finds yet to be found. Thank you, and thank you to everyone, lab crew, field crew,